The morning of May 29, 1944, mid-Atlantic, approximately 500 kilometers west of the Azores, Kapitan Leutnant Detlev Krankenhagen commanded U-549 from a depth he believed meant safety, 600 feet below the surface, deeper than most Allied depth charges could reach. His Type 9 C-40 submarine had just torpedoed and sunk the American escort carrier Block Island less than an hour before sunset. And now the hunter had become the hunted. Through the hydrophones, Krankenhagen and his crew listened to the screws of American destroyer escorts searching above. The sound was methodical, persistent. They had survived this before the standard pattern of depth charge attacks that German commanders had learned to evade through 3 years of brutal experience in the Atlantic. Drop to maximum depth, go silent. Wait for the attackers to lose sonar contact in the blind spot directly beneath their hulls. Make a sharp course change in those precious seconds when the escorts passed overhead and dropped their charges. Then endure the concussive blasts that might crack gauges and shatter light bulbs, but rarely penetrated the pressure hull at this depth. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. What Krankenhagen could not know, what no German commander fully understood in May of 1944, was that the rules of this deadly game had fundamentally changed. The destroyer escort USS Eugene E. Elmore maintained perfect sonar contact with U-549 despite the depth. Her Type 144 sonar could detect submarines at ranges up to 3,000 yards under ideal conditions, and these conditions were nearly perfect. More critically, mounted on Elmore's foredeck sat a weapon system that German naval intelligence had only begun to catalog, the Hedgehog anti-submarine mortar. At approximately 2100 hours, Lieutenant Commander G.L. Coney ordered his first attack run. 24 projectiles launched forward in rapid succession, all discharged in under 2 seconds. Each bomb was 7 in diameter, weighed 65 tonnes, and carried 35 volumes of Torpex explosive. They arced through the darkness and splashed into the Atlantic in a circular pattern 200 wide ahead of Elmore's bow. The projectiles sank at 23.5 pers at U-549's depth of 600 feet. They would arrive in approximately half a minute. Unlike depth charges that exploded at preset depths, whether they hit anything or not, these bombs only detonated on contact. The first salvo missed, sinking silently past the submarine to the ocean floor. Krankenhagen likely believed he had dodged the attack. Elmore maintained sonar contact. The destroyer escort turned for a second pass, 3 minutes to reload. Another 24 projectiles launched 30 seconds after they entered the water. 3 underwater explosions echoed through Elmore's sonar. 3 direct hits on the pressure hull. 4 minutes later, sonar operators detected a different sound, a heavy crushing explosion. U-549 had imploded as she sank past her crush depth, killing all 55 men aboard instantly. From the moment Elmore fired her second salvo to the submarine's destruction, approximately 4 minutes. This engagement represented something German U-boat commanders were only beginning to comprehend. In the spring of 1944, a technological shift that eliminated the tactical advantages they had relied upon since war began. The question that would haunt surviving German submariners through the final year of the war was stark and terrible. How do you survive an attack you cannot hear coming, cannot evade, and that arrives before you can maneuver? To understand the psychological impact of the Hedgehog, a weapon system on German U-boat crews requires understanding what those men believed about their chances of survival before this technology appeared. By 1943, German submariners operated under no illusions about the danger they faced. The Battle of the Atlantic had claimed thousands of their comrades, but they also possessed hard-won tactical knowledge that offered genuine hope for survival. German U-boat doctrine, refined through brutal experience since 1939, centered on exploiting the fundamental weakness of Allied anti-submarine warfare, the sonar blind spot. British ASDIC and American sonar systems transmitted sound pulses that bounced off submerged targets and returned as echoes. The technology worked reasonably well at medium ranges, allowing escort vessels to detect submarines and track their movements. But at close range, the physics of underwater sound detection created a critical vulnerability. As an escort vessel closed to attack, the time between the transmitted pulse and returning echo shortened progressively. Eventually, at ranges typically under 200 YRDD, The outgoing pulse and returning echo merged into what operators called an instantaneous echo. The submarine effectively vanished from sonar at precisely the moment when accurate weapon placement mattered most. This blind spot extended directly beneath the attacking ship, creating a zone where the submarine could maneuver undetected. German commanders learned to exploit this weakness with practiced precision. As the escort vessel passed overhead to drop depth charges, the submarine would execute sharp changes in direction and speed. The escort, temporarily blind, dropped its charges based on the submarine's last known position, a position that might be 50 or 100 yards from where the submarine actually maneuvered during those critical seconds. Depth charges themselves impose further limitations that worked in the submarine's favor. The Mark 6 and Mark 7 depth charges used by Allied forces through 1943 sank at approximately 8 to 9 feet per second. For a submarine at 300 feet depth, not even the maximum diving depth of most U-boat, the charges required over 30 seconds to reach attack depth after entering the water. During that half minute, while the escort remained blind and the charges slowly descended, the submarine's captain could order changes in depth, speed, and heading. The explosives and depth charges detonated at preset depths using hydrostatic fuses regardless of whether they were near the target. This created massive underwater explosions that temporarily disrupted sonar performance for both the attacker and any other escorts in the vicinity. The turbulence and noise from these explosions could persist for 15 minutes or longer, during which time the submarine might escape entirely, running silent at a different depth and heading than the escorts expected. German submarine construction emphasized structural strength, specifically to survive depth charge attacks. The pressure hull of a Type 7 CUO, the most common variant, could theoretically withstand pressures at depths approaching 750 feet, though captains rarely pushed their boats to absolute crush depth limits. More importantly, the hull could absorb substantial shock damage from depth charges exploding nearby without catastrophic failure. Multiple charges had to detonate within 10 to 20 feet of the hull to inflict fatal damage. Statistics validated this relative survivability. British records documented that during World War II, out of 5,174 depth charge attacks, only 85.5 resulted in confirmed U-boat kills, a success ratio of approximately 1 in 60. Many U-boats survived hundreds of depth charges during their operational careers. U-427 famously endured 678 depth charges dropped against it in April of 1945 before finally escaping. While such extreme cases were exceptional, they reinforced the belief among German submariners that depth charge attacks, however terrifying, were survivable if the crew maintained discipline and the captain executed proper evasive tactics. This is not to suggest German U-boat crews felt invulnerable. They understood acutely that Allied anti-submarine capabilities had improved dramatically since the early war years. By 1943, convoy escorts employed increasingly sophisticated tactics. Coordinated group attacks using multiple escort vessels made evasion more difficult. Improved sonar systems with better range and resolution reduced the time submarines could maneuver undetected. The introduction of escort carriers providing air cover over convoys eliminated the surface mobility that German Wolfpack tactics required. May of 1943, Black May, as German submariners came to call it, represented a turning point. In that single month, Allied forces sank 41 U-boat, losses that exceeded the rate at which German shipyards could build replacements. Grand Admiral Karl Donitz temporarily withdrew his submarines from the North Atlantic convoy routes, acknowledging that the balance had shifted against Germany. Yet, even as the strategic situation deteriorated, individual U-boat commanders retained tactical options based on their understanding of Allied weapons and detection systems. They could still dive deep, exploit the sonar blind spot, and maneuver during the critical seconds when escorts were dropping depth charges. The Atlantic remained a vast space where a skilled captain might find opportunities to escape or hide. The psychological framework that sustained German U-boat crews through their missions rested on this foundation of tactical knowledge. They accepted that their work was extraordinarily dangerous by war's end. Approximately 28,000 of the 40,000 men who served in U-boat would die, a casualty rate exceeding 70%. But danger and certain death were not identical concepts. Skill mattered. Experience mattered. Understanding your enemy's weapons and their limitations mattered. A competent captain who knew his boat and executed proper tactics could bring his crew home. Many had done so repeatedly. The Hedgehog anti-submarine projector entered service with British escort vessels in 1942, but its impact on German tactical calculations took time to register. Initial deployments produced disappointing results.